It has been so glorious to see so much of you over this Shabbat, and to have had the opportunity to be together Friday night, Shabbat morning, and now to close out Shabbat. So I had the opportunity to welcome Shabbat with many of you, these very same faces. But whether you're joining us again or for the first time this weekend, it is lovely to see both those of you who are here with us in the sanctuary, as well as those of you who are joining us on live stream. So if you're at home and you happen to have a Havdallah candle and a spice box and either some wine or grape juice, I encourage you to grab that. If you have one of the three, that's also great. Pretty much anything can work for spices, just something sweet smelling. Or if you have some herbs growing in your house, that works as well. And for the Havdallah candle, even though these are really gorgeous and twisted and braided and all of that, you really can just use any two candles and put them together, and that is sufficient as well. So if you have Hanukkah candles or Shabbat candles, you can even use that and to join us if you would like some of the symbols at home. So for those of you who are here, there are some sheets that were around. I don't know if there's enough for everyone, but if you want to follow along, you can grab one. I'm sorry I don't have this at home. When we do this on Zoom, I drop a link in the chat so you can follow. But hopefully the words might be familiar. Maybe it'll be a little new. You'll follow along as you're able.
Is that where is that where we're starting? Where are we starting?
I thought we were going to do live.
Oh, sorry. I'm wrong. I'm in the wrong place. Sorry.
This is my backup band. Meet Rabbi Isabel. So, hopefully, if you wanted some symbols, you have them now. As we move into Havdallah, with our light, and the joy in our Kiddush cup, and the sweetness of the spices. Baruch Shavua Tov, everyone. So we are going to not take a break, but just take a moment to reset the stage and move all of this back. What? No. As we do that, I want to invite you to think back on the Shabbat that we just celebrated, possibly all together or wherever it is that you spent the day. And if there is something especially sweet that you are carrying and with you into the week that you're holding on to, we smell the spices so that we can kind of hold on to that sweetness and let that linger a little bit. So this is our lingering time. So if there's something that you're thinking about, either just kind of find a place for that in your mind or in your heart or in your soul, or turn to someone next to you, and if you want to share with them what that sweetness is, feel free to do that, and then we'll all gather back together in just a moment.
I will let them do magical things. Yes.
Do we need the partition?
Any kind of fruit or and I try and have at least 2 of these a day.
Yeah.
Not more.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. We are going to start tonight. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. So welcome. And tonight is the town hall question component. We have some questions that sort of came out of conversations that we've had with the committee, and we want to have an opportunity to talk to Rabbi Roni, ask her some additional questions, and then we will take questions from the audience if we haven't covered everything possible. So, to start off, as a Reconstructionist ordained rabbi in a conservative shul, how do you bridge the 2 schools of thought?
So it's a good question. So I guess, one thing that I would say is that, so Reconstructionist Judaism actually grew out of conservative Judaism. So in some ways, the schools of thought are maybe not so wildly different, in that the way that I was trained at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College is that, everything that we do should be very grounded in tradition. Mm-hmm. And we should, fully immerse ourselves in that tradition and assume that we're taking some of that with us. And it's not, sort of the informed choice of the Reform movement. That's like a very personal choice of what we're doing. It's also very community-based. And I think that that is also consistent with who we are as a community. So that as we are thinking thoughtfully, and as we are, considering sort of what it is that we want to do in the world, that's also not a very personal thing. It's something that we all figure out together. Mm-hmm. So as we think about conservative communities and conservative Judaism, I think there's a lot of different ways of being a conservative synagogue. Mm-hmm. And so I think that that's also a question for all of us to think on and to grapple with ourselves, to think about who are we as a conservative community and a conservative congregation. Having been here for the last 5 years, from what I've seen, it is, I have felt at home with my personal approach to Judaism in my family. I was raised in a conservative synagogue and in a family that was sort of, practicing, conservative Judaism. So that's kind of always been who I am and what I do. And so, that has just continued here. And it's actually been nice to even bring back some of the teaching and traditions into the religious school that actually weren't there before, so that I can make sure that we're passing that on to future generations and not just assuming that they know what some of these things are, but actually making sure that we're taking time to really explain some of those mitzvot and some of those pieces to our students and by extension to our families.
Okay. And then along those lines, how do you view the status of conservative Judaism today, and what will make the conservative movement or Judaism in general thrive in the future?
Ooh.
Too hard.
Okay, so there are two parts to the question. It was like the status of the conservative movement and then thriving. Okay.
Yes.
So if many of you have probably read the articles or heard that the conservative movement is in a difficult place right now in terms of rabbinic placement. There are way more congregations looking for jobs than there are rabbis who are looking to have those positions, which is, I think a result of many different things. I mean, some of it is lower enrollment in rabbinical schools across the board, and some of that, I don't know. I don't know if that is a product of, where folks are choosing to find their home and call their home. I think that the conservative movement, can have and has had an important place in the landscape of Judaism, because of what I just said, that it is a movement that is very rooted in tradition, which is kind of just like what a lot of people think about when it's like, well, this is what it means to be Jewish. And, whether you're going to synagogue or you're keeping kosher or you're observing mitzvot in a particular way, that feels really important. But it also feels really important for us to be living in the 21st century and to acknowledge where we are in 2022 and to be able to make some of the adaptations that we've made, especially over the last 2 years in the pandemic with thinking about technology and Zoom and all of these things. And so I will be honest that sometimes the conservative movement moves slower than some of the rest of us might be ready for. But I think that there is an acknowledgement that we also can't jump to just, make big sweeping changes without process and without really thinking about what that might mean. So I think that the conservative movement still is a very important. It still holds a very important place in the landscape of liberal Judaism, especially both in America and around the world. And I think there's a bigger question there of the future of movements in general, perhaps in America, and what that might look like in another 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So, that could be for another time. But I think that it's really important for folks to be able to find a home where they can feel like have that rootedness, and also figure out what it means to sort of hold that alongside of everything else, because that's what the rabbis have been doing for centuries, always trying to figure out where we are and what do we do in this new moment. And we are just in a very interesting moment right now that is bringing up a lot of questions.
Right. How do we evolve?
How do we evolve? Yeah. I mean, and it's so we've been doing it, and we'll continue to figure out how to navigate that.
Okay. So our membership has diverse levels of Jewish observance and comfort levels ranging from Reform to Orthodox observances. How would you meet each member where they are and make everyone feel included?
Yeah. That's one of the things that makes BTBJ so great, I think, is that, everyone didn't necessarily walk in the door because they feel like, well, I'm a conservative Jew, and so this must be where I have to be, and this, feels like an obvious choice in that way. Mm-hmm. From what I have seen, that everyone I've talked to has kind of found their way here for so many different reasons, and it's usually the people. Whether it's, Marcy, who they met in ECC, or whether it's a friend and a neighbor that you brought with you from someone new who moved into your neighborhood, or someone you met, at work or somewhere else in your life. It's the people that really make the place. And I think there's a real advantage and an opportunity to be able to learn from one another in that. And they know where they're coming, I think. They know that they didn't choose to come to a Reform synagogue or an Orthodox synagogue. So I hope that there can be some sense of a base and some commonality in sort of what the expectation is for what we're doing, and not being angry that we're, kind of keeping things in a particular way that might not be observant enough or might be too observant for someone, because they kind of know the choice that they made. But at the same time, whenever I lead or whenever I teach, I always try to recognize that we're all in different places on the journey. And so some people might be new to Judaism entirely, and some people might have kind of found their way all over the Jewish world, just as I have on my journey. And so we might not all have been exposed to the same things or have learned the same things. And just because a person may have come in from an Orthodox background doesn't mean that they know more than someone who came in from a Reform background. So we're all kind of in different places with all of this, and I think we're all ideally always looking to learn and engage more, and engage at the different stages of our lives as well. So, I always try to, not just assume knowledge, for whether I'm, sort of leading or teaching, and always try to kind of bring everybody in to what it is that we're doing, so that whether you're new to this or whether this is something you've been doing for a long time, hopefully you can find an access point in and sort of find your way through, whatever it is that we're doing, and also have something to take away from it that will still feel new and inspiring. And I think that if we kind of have that mentality in whatever we're doing, and also honor and want to hear from those different points of view, I think we'll all just continue to be enriched by that.
So in our congregational survey, our community really strongly indicated that they wanted a rabbi who was going to engage with them, get to connect with them, get to know them personally. What would be your approach to get to know the members that you have not, obviously you've connected with so many of our members already, but for that group of people that maybe you haven't had the opportunity to interact with, how would you reach out?
And so I think that I'm interested in actually reaching out to both those who I maybe haven't crossed paths with, and there was someone the other night who I came across at an oneg, and I had met the partner, but not the other person, and I said, how is it possible that we've never met so far? So there are definitely those who I have not crossed paths with, but whether there's people who I've met before or people who I haven't, I have an interest in sitting down with everybody. Mm-hmm. And so my goal would really be in the first year to pick up the phone and try to reach out to every single person. Our congregation is large, but it's not too big that doesn't seem like a reasonable goal. And whether we then sit down, one-on-one together, have a quick phone call, get together in people's homes, in their backyards, go for a walk in the Wissahickon, whatever it might be, I think there's lots of opportunities to be able to just be with one another, whether it's, face-to-face on the phone or over Zoom. That is just a way of opening the door. Mm-hmm. Because, any casual conversation has the potential to go much more deep. If we allow for that, and if we even just sort of take that initial step to make that connection. And once we've made that connection, making the next one is usually that much easier.
So what strategies do you have, or would you like to further develop in keeping teenagers and young adults post-B'nai Mitzvah age engaged?
We've been working on this one. This is so my goal for teenagers and post-B'nai Mitzvah is to just have them continue to choose to be involved in Jewish community, whatever that looks like. And so, God willing, they choose to do that with us, and I think that those who have chosen to continue on through confirmation have really been enjoying themselves. And, this year I have been so amazed to see the kids coming in on Wednesday evening, whether it's in 7th grade or whether in our Hay class, or whether it's in our teen program with Cantor Benjamin and Tara. And they're so enthusiastic to come. I hear from parents constantly like, oh, they had a lot of homework, but they really wanted to come, so I guess they'll figure out their homework later. And and Matt will complain that they just like talk so much, but I said, well, it's better than having bumps on a log. And like they're just so excited to be with one another. So again, that goes back to the fact that people are just happy to be with one another in this community, which will take you a long way. I think But if they choose that, wonderful. If they're really engaged with BBYO, we had such a beautiful BBYO dinner that, they asked to use our space on Friday night, and seeing how full that room was, something that they're nurturing their own leadership in doing, that's great. So I hope that they choose something like that as well. Or maybe there's something else that they're doing. I mean, we have an increasing number of students who are continuing on to volunteer or work in our religious school on Sunday. And I mean, I'm running out of places to put them, which is a very good problem to have. And I have more who want to get started, which is wonderful. So whether they're doing just like one online class on Zoom or they're here every Sunday, the little ones also see that, and they get very excited and they sort of see them as role models. So I hope that it's sort of inspiring in all directions. So I feel like we've made some strides in that department, and I hope that, God willing, as things get, we sort of continue to move through this pandemic, that we can continue to enrich that program, so that, we've talked about, we're working on planning a Philly trip right now, but we've talked about trips to other places, and we had one scheduled to go to the Holocaust Museum in D.C., like right when we shut down 2 years ago. But we would love to be able to get back to trips to New York or trips to D.C. I've talked to folks about, civic engagement trips that are both in D.C. and in the South to learn about, to learn so much. But we need to be able to get back there. But I think having something to look forward to that's unique and special also about their engagement here would hopefully be able to inspire more people to continue to want to participate. But I will also say that Cantor Benjamin has done a phenomenal job recruiting folks to continue into the teen program. Kids get excited to having worked with him through the process of becoming B'nai Mitzvah, and they're excited to continue with him. So that's been great. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. How would you lead the community through contentious political issues?
That never happened.
Everybody always gets along.
Everyone always gets
Agrees
along.
on everything.
Well, I think first of all that's one of the things that again makes BCBJ who we are. That we're not just one homogenous group of people who all think the same way, who all vote the same way, who all come from the same background. That we are a diverse community, and that's part of what makes us special. And that feels really important because, and I've talked to other folks about this as well, and that everyone wants to feel safe here. I mean, that's the goal. Whether it's safety from security issues in the world, or whether it's safe just being who you are and believing whatever it is that you believe, and however it is that you came to believe that. This should be a place for everyone. And that's our tagline, BTBJ, where you belong. And that's true for everyone. And that would really be my goal, to make sure that, that I am connecting with, all of the members of our community, no matter, what their background might be, no matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans or everything in between or beyond or whatever that might be. And that, what we're talking about and the way that we're talking about that is a way that everyone can kind of find themselves within that. And so I hope that that's something that I've been able to do in, the work that I've done here over the last 5 years. And I hope that that's something that I would continue to do.
Okay. Support for Israel is obviously really important to all of us. What are some ways that you would help members engage with Israel?
Yeah, that's really important. So I have loved we talk in congregational learning how every year it's important to us that we have at least a couple programs on the calendar that are specifically, with Israel in mind. And that's always an intention that we have. One of the things that I have really appreciated is the connection that Michael Dvorak continues to create for us with his relatives at Kibbutz Hanaton in Israel, which is the conservative kibbutz in Israel. And so we've generally had at least one program a year with them, and it's so interesting to hear what they're doing, in the moment, what's new in their education. They have like a huge educational center there, and so hearing what's going on, just in their world as they continue to grow and evolve and change, but also, depending on whatever the moment is, we kind of get their perspective on, what life is on the ground. It's also been really great for the kids who have been able to take part in it. This year, we've had one online junior congregation every month, and so far this year they have been led by my friend and colleague, Cantor Genderetz Pellet, who had recently made Aliyah. So she was coming to us live from Herzliya every Sunday, or every Saturday. It was Saturday morning for us, but Saturday afternoon for her. So that was really cool too, because it not only was a way to move through the Shabbat morning service, but at the same time, she would bring, Israeli pop culture to them, or talk about, what life was like there, what Shabbat was like there, what different holidays were like there, which was, again, just kind of, this is like a very real live thing. This isn't just the Israel that we learn about in the Torah.
Right.
Israel's a real place. And so I think that's an important piece as well, to continue to be able to bring to our students and to our adults. And we had a great program here a few years ago that I would love to be able to do more of, where we had the shlicha at the time from Federation, from the Jewish Agency, Bat El came and led a great program with our teens and our adults together, which it was such a cool experience to have everyone kind of learning, at different ages and different levels, kind of as I said before. And everyone, I think, walked away learning something new, because her story of kind of having lived in Israel and then her learning more about Israel, because everyone kind of has their own experience, but when there's so much that we can learn about the place and the people who live there, was really wonderful. So I think like having it be a sort of a constant part of what we're doing and a priority in our conversations and in our education is essential as we think about our time together. And it would be wonderful if we could, again, God willing, pandemic permitting, also get the congregation to Israel together. Because I've spoken to folks who've been on trips in the past, and I know for myself, I've been a part of a couple of different things in my life. I helped plan the first, it was called then the Noach Hadash Israel Experience for the Reconstructionist movement. The first time we took a group of teens from the movement, I helped plan it, and then I took the teens there over the summer. Actually, the babysitter we had this morning was one of my teens at that time. Now she's, an adult, and I feel old. But it's it's beautiful to kind of have that relationship, and so to have been a part of their lives at in such a critical moment in their formation and in such an intense way has created this bond between us. And then again, when I had the opportunity to lead a trip of 20s and 30s with Honeymoon Israel a couple of years ago. There was also, both of them were such unique experiences that when you do something like that, one, it is life-changing for the people who go, and for the bonding that they can have together, and to just get to, it's, again, like, bring it to life. This isn't just, sort of things that we read in a book or see on a map, but to get to, walk around the shuk and smell what that is like and see what it's like before Shabbat, and to be able to also see and learn about and experience all of the incredible creativity and energy and projects that are happening on the grounds from, real live Israelis today, is also really meaningful to kind of really get a sense of the culture and the people. And that's also something that doesn't have to only be experienced during that, week or 10 days that you're there, but that is something that we can also continue to connect with and to bring to folks, even before or after having such an experience, so that for those who aren't able to make that trip, that they're still able to kind of connect with the community, and to be able to reap the benefits of that kind of learning and that kind of connection.
Okay. What types of community service or social action projects inspire you?
Ooh. Oh my gosh, there's so many. So, I think that there's maybe some different ways of answering that. So I think that, in some ways I talked about this a little bit last night in thinking about our Torah portion for today. So I really enjoy direct service in general. And because I think that it can be so meaningful to be able to recognize and appreciate all that we have, and to really kind of cultivate that sense of gratitude in ourselves, that like, oh my goodness, that there's so many people for whom their basic needs are not met on a regular basis. And so, that's something that we've been trying to do with the 7th grade programs that we've been planning this year for our 7th grade and the ones at Temple Sinai, to have like different experiences every month where they can like learn about different issues that are kind of right in our own backyard. Because I think that's another thing to remember, that it is not something that is other or far away, but it's something that's right here. And I think the more that we can kind of meet, and not just kind of do things that feel like they are disconnected from those who are receiving, but when you can experience some humanity around the work that you're doing, it kind of radically changes your sense of your own kind of universe of obligation of, who it is that we're all responsible for, and hopefully in an ongoing sort of way. So it's not like, oh, I gave my can of food and now I'm good, but it's realizing like, wow, there's a lot of hunger and poverty in Philadelphia, and like, what can I do about that in a regular sort of way? And I think it's also something that we, have tried to, and just in our own home, to try to inspire in our kids as well. It's been really fun to have our older one in the 3rd grade at SCH, where they're in charge of the food pantry collections, and it's like a big deal in the school, which is very cool. So they get to like count them all up and like tell everyone what they're bringing, and Dahlia's like, she's like, I need soup. You have to get soup. I need 3 more cans of soup. I'm like, okay, great. But I love that they're asking for that, and it's been so great to work with you over the years in the social action committee here at BCBJ, and I think that also feels really important to just have it feel like what we're doing, that there's a sort of like a constant, that we're inspiring in our community also, to kind of help teach them about some of the issues that are really important, and so that because you have seen, like, once you ask for something, the outpouring is usually overwhelming. People just need an excuse to give. So I get inspired by seeing that in other people as well, and then it inspires me to want to do more.
So the question is, how do you choose a high holiday sermon? But I'm going to open that up to, how do you choose any sermon? Because I have no idea.
Yeah, what does that process look like? Yeah, it's true. I guess high holidays could be a little bit different. So I guess I'll answer any sermon first, and then maybe more specifically think about high holidays, because they are a little bit different. So for any old Shabbat or holiday, I choose a sermon as I'm starting to learn. So if I have to, for this weekend, I gave 2 Divrei Torah and a Torah study, and so I usually just sit down with the text for a while, and in a lot of different ways. So I start by reading over whatever, the parsha is of that week, and then I see what kind of jumps out at me. So, parshas are partially or long, and so typically there's different things that will jump out at me in different years, for whatever reason. That's why we read Torah year after year. And so I kind of just spend some time learning with it, and then as something kind of emerges, and then I start to have more questions about it, and then I dive into even more learning about that. And so then I'm kind of like pulling all the sources off my shelf, and I'm looking on, there's a great website called Svaria. They have a lot of commentary that's there as well, so you can kind of see what's over there. I talk to friends, I listen to podcasts, and I just kind of like see as much as I can, as many perspectives as I can find to sort of inspire me, to help me kind of think through how other folks have been thinking about the questions that I have as well, and that will send me in all different directions. So I don't really always know, I don't usually know actually what I'm going to say on a particular topic until I kind of spend some time meandering down that road. And then usually as I do, things start to come together, and I might look for other texts to kind of speak to whatever it is that I'm doing, or I kind of bring questions that I've posed to the community even, of what does this make you think of? To hopefully walk away finding something to inspire us in this moment. Since we read these texts every year, and even if we're sort of diving into the same text, the question we pull out to inspire us today might be different. So that's kind of, I guess, how I would think about that on any old, Shabbat, average Shabbat. And it's fun. And I enjoy doing that. And it's the sort of thing that will sometimes take as much time as you let it, so you can really get lost in it, which is really fun. And sometimes you have to, realize you have to move on to other things and just, start writing. But that's what you'll usually find me doing kind of before Shabbat. For high holidays, it might be a little of the same, depending on where you're going. But really, it's usually more, about thinking about what kind of vision we want to be setting for the year as a community. What's going on in the world? The question that I often have is not just like, what does everyone else need to hear, but what do I need to hear? And chances are there might be some overlap in sort of what that message might be. And so, the process might be a little bit of the same as I think about, what stories or texts or whatever that I might want to engage with to kind of look for answers. And then there are those years where you have all your sermons done and the world explodes, and then you have to throw them all out and start over. But it is about kind of thinking on Yom Kippur about like the deep introspection that we're doing, and where are we, and like what do we need in that. And that has been, even just looking at the last few years of thinking about what we've been living through, that has like the questions for me anyway that have come up and how I've thought about moving through that time have been a little bit different than in other moments, because my goal is to help us to enter into those holidays so that we can really, so that the sermons also kind of inspire the work that we're supposed to be doing. So that there's sort of an accompaniment to all of the liturgy that we have, so that together we can really kind of raise up the points in there of what the work that we're supposed to be doing, both individually and communally. But to also be able to kind of think about whatever it is that as a community we're trying to accomplish that year, then I think High Holiday sermons are a wonderful opportunity to kind of share that vision with the community. So if we have a theme for the year, like let's talk about that. Let's begin that learning together. If there's something else going on in the community that we wanna engage in, that's a great time to do that as well. Okay, great.
All right, so let's talk about some interest outside the rabbinate. Other than the Torah, tell us about the last book you read, or maybe your favorite book.
Ooh. So the last book I read, I think it was called something like Wildflower something by Meir Shalev. I don't remember what it was called. As I can see the cover, I know. Something, my Wild Garden, I think it might be called, which is so beautiful. So I love gardening. We were joking that my neighbor likes to weed, and I'm like, great, come weed my garden. But I actually really also love to weed. I find it very soothing and very, a big sense of accomplishment when you can see it all done, and getting to kind of sort of tend to the earth in that way, and tend to the species around me and all of that. And so the book that My Wild Garden is, Meir Shalev is just describing his wild garden in Israel. And so it is, you get this, there's even an illustrator who drew these beautiful pictures of each of these flowers that he described. So like every chapter basically is like talking, you should read it, Mom. Every chapter is like a different flower, and he like talks about like how he tends to them, and like the way in which he'll like, carefully like extract the seeds, or he'll go like save plants as like bulldozers are coming through, so that he can bring them into his garden, and so that he can watch them bloom, and the way like how the way in which you can kind of track every season and every, not even every season, every like micro moment in the season, because now's the time for this flower to come up, and now's the time for this flower to come up, and this one only comes up once, and this is the first time this one comes up, and then it comes up again and again. But one of the things that I know that I think that part of why I love it so much is because one of the things that I fell in love with is during the time that I lived in Israel, first when I was in college and I was living in the Negev, it's like the desert, there's nothing there. I got there in August, it was the summer, it was dry, it was brown, there was nothing there. And then I was living there as the rainy season started. And all of a sudden, when it rains, it pours, literally, and everything would flood. And then as the water started to recede, all these flowers just started popping up. And so he would sort of talk about this phenomenon also in his book. And so that was my first experience, and I fell in love with the desert in general. And then when Isabel and I went back for the year when we were in rabbinical school, it was the same sort of experience where, you read about these holidays in Torah, and you read about, we have this like the change of liturgy from like rainy season to dry season, and we have these different, pilgrimage festivals or harvest holidays or whatever it is, and we were once a very agriculturally focused people, and then we got to see it in action, and so we got to see again, kind of getting there in September. It was right after Yom Kippur. Actually, we got there on Erev Sukkot. And then watching as everything like the dry hills in Jerusalem went from brown and slowly turned green. And so as we would like take weekend trips out, like all of these hills that in every trip I had ever taken in the summer, for whatever it is that I had done, they were always brown, and all of a sudden they were green. It was astounding. And then we went up north and got to see all the wildflowers. Like March is a beautiful time to go to Israel and go up north because it's so colorful, and that's not what you see if you go on a trip in June. And then we went back actually a few weeks later, right as we were kind of moving into, Pesach and then the counting of the Omer, and all of a sudden everything was brown again. So there, it was just like such an appreciation for the land, and I think seeing it like in this like sort of smaller scale that he was describing, where it's like just this living, breathing world of his garden was really beautiful. Marsha would really like the book too.
So what was the last movie you saw, or do you have a favorite movie?
Encanto. Which is phenomenal for all people if you have not seen it. It is not just for kids. If you are a Lin-Manuel Miranda fan, which I've never met someone who's not, then you will love the music. I apologize in advance because it gets stuck in my head. Yeah, I may have woken up several times with one of the songs stuck in my head because it's all about like pressure and anxiety. And not that I've had any of that in the last week, but it's actually just this beautiful story of, like tragic and heavy, but a kids movie of communal trauma and the different ways in which we then deal with that in our families, or how different personalities might kind of enact that in their lives. So, on the one hand, it's this like adorable kids movie, and they'll pick up what they want and like love whichever character they decide to connect with. But on the other hand, there's actually some very deep lessons for the rest of us some deeper levels that I think we can all connect to. Someday I'll see an adult movie.
So when you have the opportunity to unwind and choose a movie or something of your own choosing, how do you unwind? Not with a movie, but in general.
Oh, I don't know. When was the last time I did that? There's what life used to look like, and there's the last couple of years. No, but seriously, I love nature. I love to be outdoors. So we feel very blessed where we live that we can kind of just go for hikes and like in multiple access points in the Wissahickon, and Isabel has learned a lot of the trails and she's been running them. So that's great because then we can think about which ones are safe for the kids in different weather and all of that. So that's something that we all enjoy doing. And sometimes we'll go together, or sometimes we'll all four of us go. I like to be active. I love to do yoga and to kind of find ways to relax my body and my mind. And sometimes we will just, watch a TV show. It's a lot shorter than a movie. That's kind of the time that we have. We really love British shows. All Creatures Great and Small. That's the one we're watching right now. I don't know what's so lovely about them, but there's something so lovely about them. Also, cooking shows. I've gotten Dahlia really hooked on the Kids Baking Championship, which I am not sad about. And yeah, in my formal life, I love taking pictures and traveling to places where I got to take pictures. So maybe I'll get to do that again someday. But I also just really value the time that we get to spend, with our family here. And going down the shore as well, and spending some time at the beach.
Do you have a favorite food or something you like to cook? Do you like to cook?
I love to cook.
Okay.
So some of I've gotten kind of into gluten-free baking, and I continue to work on perfecting my gluten-free challah recipe. It's an ongoing, evolving process. Since it's only so good, so it's like there's always room for improvement, but it's pretty good. But I do love to cook. So we have been a member of a CSA for like 15 years or something. So community supported agriculture through Lancaster Farm Fresh. So sometimes all year round. I took a break this winter, but definitely through the spring, summer, and fall. We pick up a vegetable, fruit, egg, milk, and yogurt delivery on a weekly basis. And what I love about that is that I don't really get to pick what I'm going to get. And so there are other CSAs where you can pick what you're going to get. I actually like the fun of not picking and seeing what they give me, because then it inspires me to make new things. When left to my own devices, if I'm going to the grocery store, I cook the same things all the time, or I run out of ideas. But when they give me what to eat, and I mean, one, it's nice knowing that we're eating seasonally and we're supporting the local farmers, and our kids kind of just know that like that's a thing that we do. Like it's Tuesday, time to go get the food, and then that inspires me to cook. So I'm like, okay, and like I feel like this is more my thing in the house. Like Isabel has other things that she likes to make. She doesn't always have the patience for this, I think. But it's like, okay, we have these random 3 things in the house. Let's look up some recipes and make a new thing. And I found some favorites through that. But it's also fun to kind of both follow recipes, find new ones, and also just kind of intuit it and figure out how to either make it on our own or how to make it in a gluten-free version. And so that I definitely love to be in the kitchen. And our kids, I think, as a result, also enjoy helping us in the kitchen. And at least the older one is an adventurous eater. We're still working on the younger one. Right, the younger one will eat all the fruits and vegetables. So the CSA does come in handy. She is made of fruits and vegetables, as her teachers know.
All right, well, that's all the official questions I have on my list, but we're happy to open it up to the congregation. Anybody have any questions? And if you do, I'm going to have to repeat it so that Zoom land can hear it. Yes?
So one question, this is the only synagogue in Springfield County, actually, and with that being said, the one thing that we learned, having lived here over the years, is that when things were tough in the community, over the years, things have happened in the community, not involving our synagogue per se, but involving the schools, that the synagogue rose to
Absolutely.
it truly became a pillar in a community that is not Jewish. So my question to you is, with the and by the way, there is an uptick in anti-Semitism in this township as well.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, how, as the rabbi of the synagogue, how would you, number one, continue that, and number two, reestablish it to some degree, because obviously there's a change in leadership. And I say that with the idea anyone that's ever spoken to people in this community, it's unbelievable the reputation BTBJ had when there was a school shooting, how the synagogue was the religious leader that came first to it. So my question is, how do we continue that?
All right, so let me just try to recap that. I should have just had you come up here and ask.
Yeah, we can always go over it.
But the question is, since BTBJ is the only synagogue in the immediate Springfield community, how do we continue to represent and be a good example of a community leader as we have been all these years?
And to connect with the surrounding community.
And to connect with the surrounding communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so important for both for us and for the sake of everybody else. I remember when that shooting happened. It was many years ago, and so I wasn't really kind of connected in this area then. But I remember I had students who were here, and I remember how terrified they were. So I think one is from the beginning, kind of having those introductions with the folks in the community, so that we're known entities to one another. So that I know that I can reach out to them if I have a question, because I would hate to have the first time I'm reaching out being like, well, I heard there's an anti-Semitic incident, but I'd rather walk up and say, hi, I'm new here ish, and I'd love to meet you so that we can kind of work together. So I think one is sort of establishing that base, and then two, I'm I guess astounded, upset, not surprised, all at the same time, when I have heard from our students, both here and in the Colonial School District, of all of the anti-Semitism that they have experienced over the years. And I don't know the extent to which all of them even come home and tell their parents, or whether it just feels like no big deal at this point, or like it's just water under the bridge. I don't know. In some cases, I know that that they have. And so, there are times, so I mean, I would hope that more of that information would come to me from our community also, so that I know when things are happening. I mean, God willing, it's not something so horrific as a shooting or, a huge anti-Semitic incident that, is like calls for like a larger communal response, but even for the smaller kind of microaggressions and things that are happening, like, I don't know how much are the principals of the schools, I'm just, thinking about the schools as an example, like, are they aware of it or not? So I think that's something that just like raising an awareness of all of that, I think both within our community, and the more that I know, the more that I can be kind of reaching out and being a resource and a conduit for those conversations. So hopefully people will come to me and I'll know that information. But I think the other thing that feels really important in being the only synagogue is to make connections with the other faith communities, both in Springfield and sort of our larger area. And I think that, that also feels like a really deep and important piece of the work. And again, kind of starting out from like, hi, I'm newish here, so that we can all meet one another and establish those relationships, or continue those relationships depending on, who it is that we're working with. Because we are sort of in a unique position where on the one hand, there's where we're situated in Springfield. On the other hand, there's kind of where we pull from. So those relationships, I think, are also important beyond Springfield, and thinking about the other faith communities in Chestnut Hill and the other faith communities in Lafayette Hill, because that's where we all kind of share neighbors and friends and all of that. So that kind of extends in a larger way. And, I think that there's also, some great organizations in Philadelphia that are also doing really important interfaith work, and I would love to see us get involved with them, because all of this is sort of, a part of just educating one another, meeting one another, kind of going back to what I said before of like, seeing the humanity in one another and really having a chance to understand where we're coming from. Maybe that could help, sort of, alleviate some of the anti-Semitism that's cropping up in the first place if we all sort of know one another. But even aside from anti-Semitism, it's just a way for us to get to know one another. So whether it's through Interfaith Philadelphia, and there's a great program called Walking the Walk that our teens actually talking about our teens that could get involved with. We actually had a speaker in January talking about another organization, Interfaith Power and Light, that brings together faith communities to do work together and learning together around climate justice. So there's a lot of ways in which we can kind of put ourselves out there and become a part of these other networks, where we don't have to necessarily build it all from nothing, but we could do that too, but we could also kind of connect with these other organizations, so that, God forbid, when things happen, we're not calling a stranger, but we're calling a friend.
Other questions? Bert,
Should we just give him a microphone?
yeah, you want to?
If you were to become our next rabbi, someone else would have to be running the school, and your involvement with the religious school would not be anywhere near as intense as it is now. What type of involvement do you expect you would have in that position?
Okay. Kind of doing both jobs right now. Don't want to do that forever, that's for sure. My hope is that I would still be extremely involved in this school. It is glorious to know every student in the religious school. I have loved the temperature checks that we've been doing in the morning for no other reason than I get to see every person on their way in. And I get to say hello and good morning, and parents usually walk them to the door so I can say hello to their parents. And it's just so nice to have that opportunity. If I'm hiding in my office when everyone's coming in and like going out, then it's like as if it never happened. So I would love to be able to continue that and to be able to do that even more in the ECC as well. My hope is that I can have, in some ways, I may end up being a little bit more removed from the administrative day-to-day of what's happening, but I hope that could then just create opportunities for me to be more involved on the ground with the students. Because one of the things that has been challenging sometimes, I'll have scheduled time to be teaching in the class, but usually I can try to push everything aside to make that happen, like I'm doing tomorrow when I'm going to be in the class. But sometimes I have an intention of wanting to be with the class in a particular way, and then there's like an emergency that kind of calls me away, or something that is a little bit more time sensitive. So my hope is that some of those things could get passed along to somebody else, so that I could have even more time with the students, because I miss having opportunities where we can all be together as a school. That's something that we haven't been able to do over the last 2 years. Instead, Benjamin and I kind of push into classes in different ways, but it would be really nice to be able to kind of bring everyone together to have some sort of davening experience, all the entire school. The little ones will get what they get. They'll learn from the big ones. The big ones can review what they're learning, and that would be so beautiful. And so, teachers do already and have been coming to me for years when things come up and say, can you come in and answer some questions about God? Or my kids are asking questions about science and the Bible. Can you come on in and talk about that? So I've been doing things like that, for years already. And I would hope that I could continue to do that, both in a as it comes up sort of way, in a planned sort of way, like getting ready for a class service and kind of still being very deeply involved in some of that, and in a way that's just kind of here and a presence and wandering around. Because I think that what would be, the advantage will be that, in this new moment, I would also be able to be a resource not only for the students but for the families. Because I'm very busy with the kids right now on Sunday morning, and so it's hard to sometimes tear myself away to come to some of the programming that we might have during that time, or to be able to lead the programming that might happen during that time. So I would hope that I can just kind of have my hands in even more pots in some ways, rather than less, and that. But my hope is that I would continue to kind of maintain and deepen those relationships, even as new folks are, join the community, because it's really special to get to know each of the students and, and who they are, and, how to kind of get them involved, and what's going to make them nervous, and what, where I can really help them shine, so that, when we're sitting down to talk about B'nai Mitzvah, like I kind of already have a sense of where we are.
You've addressed this a little bit already, but what are some of the things you kind of love and value about this community that would inspire you to want to take on this role?
There's so many things that I love and value about this community. I found my way here a long time ago for lots of different reasons. A lot thanks to Pace for choosing it for preschool, and then here we are. But what I have come to learn is, and I guess I knew but has sort of deepened, is that BTBJ is such a warm community. Everyone describes it, self-describes it, and I think other people describe us as being really Hamish, which also speaks to that warmth and just the fact that we really want to be together and like being together. I love that, I both love and want to continue the work of sort of maintaining BTBJ as a traditionally inspired community, who is, also eager to think about what it means to be here in 2022, and to kind of take in all of the creativity and inspiration that has been happening in the Jewish world for decades, and that continues to happen. Steve and I were talking about some of this over dinner, that there's, all of these amazing organizations that are out there in the world, whether it's in, the land of Jewish learning, and so there's organizations like Hadar, producing just such incredible content. We're actually using it in our 5th grade class this year, but we could be bringing it to even more parts of the community for our adults and for their learning, for connecting more with Joey Weissenberg, who's right here in Philly, and the Rising Song Institute, and the Song Leader Boot Camp to, have more and more music that's coming in. All of these things are sort of things that we're already doing, and I would love to just be able to do more of that. Because I feel like what I have sensed about our community is that everyone is just really happy to show up, really happy to support one another, really happy to learn together, and I hope that everyone will just continue to share what ideas that they have, because we are small enough to be nimble, to also kind of like take in whatever that information is, and to not just have an approach of like, well, this is the way we've always done it, so this is what we have to do, but to constantly be able to ask the question of like, well, this is what we did, do we still want to do it that way, and how might we want to do it differently? But it is a place that I have, felt at home in for some time, and I know that others have as well. And I hope that, the more that we can kind of maintain and deepen those relationships, I think that's really at the heart of everything else that we can do together.
I got one. It's a softball.
I'm shocked.
Just one. What's the meaning of life, and how do you communicate that?
But high holiday sermons, of course. Do you really want me to answer that?
What's your version of what life is all about, and how do you communicate that as our spiritual leader?
Seriously. Okay.
Happens when you give him the mic.
I know. Who did that? Who did that? You know,
It's a softball. It's an easy one.
yeah, you and Meryl. You know, I think it is. I think that's actually, I mean, a question that has probably weighed on a lot of us over these last few years. You know, we were all kind of chugging along, doing whatever we were doing, whether or not we were happy doing it, or whether or not we felt like we had a choice in doing it, and then everything stopped. And I think that created an opportunity of, I mean, panic, fear, all of that. But hopefully somewhere along the lines, I think, and I guess I know, and I've seen, that it has also provided an opportunity to reset a little bit. And for folks to be able to ask questions about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and not just doing it because they feel like they're supposed to, or they need to, or again, just because they've always done it, but to really think about what your priorities are. And so, you know, when I think about the purpose of this community, it is to be able to grapple with all of that in a day-to-day sort of way. So we might not be sitting down and you know, deeply answering, like, this is the meaning of life and this is why I'm here. But it is supposed to offer us inspiration along the way and helping to figure that out. I mean, I don't have the answer to that, but I hope I have a lot of questions that will help others to think about where they are in this moment with that, and what is the next step or the next choice that they feel like they want to or need to make, even if it's something that's really hard because it's going to take them down a different road. And I think that's what faith traditions and Judaism has to offer us also, is a lot of knowledge, a lot of history. You know, our ancestors that we read about were not perfect. I mean, we read all the different ways in which Moses was angry and the people did silly things, and all sorts of things that are maybe not ways in which we might live up to doing that in our lives. But I hope it could also remind us that none of us are perfect, and we all make mistakes, and we all sometimes need a chance to start again. And so I hope that when coming to BTBJ, we can have an opportunity to learn together, to find inspiration together, to just sit for a minute, whether it's in davening or in a meditation session or whatever it might be, or just in my office to talk, so that we can kind of become more present to whatever moment that we're in, whether it's a joyful one or whether it's a difficult one, so that we can just kind of keep making the next best choice. Because I think that being able to the more that we're able to be present and open to each of those moments, then we will be ready to figure out the answer to that question, wherever it might be. Just take it away from Josh.
Okay, any other questions? All right, well, I just want to thank Rabbi Roni so much for everything so far this beautiful Shabbat weekend, and for joining me today at BTBJ TV, and thank everybody who joined us remotely. And we're gonna now go ahead and have our dessert reception, and then tomorrow morning we'll be back here at 9:30 for Minyan and some adult learning opportunity. And we hope you guys will all join us tomorrow.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you.